Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy, and joining me again, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone.
Yes, so this week we're doing the codon ring of union, which consists of 4, 7, 29, and 59. So, what can you tell us about the theme that arises from this codon ring?
Well, it's primarily about the purification and the elevation of human relationships. That seems to be the theme.
Mhm.
We're only looking at two today of the four, but that's the common theme here.
Mhm. And so, can you? Oh, sorry. Do you want to start off by talking about number 7, or where are we
Sure.
starting today?
We're starting with seven, and that's kind of a chronological thing. Although, yeah, now we are at mid Leo. Um, And all of these, interestingly, in the wheel of the zodiac are they're adjacent to each other. They're run out right after each other.
Mhm.
Anyway, the seven is about the journey from division to virtue via the way of guidance. The amino acid is valine, and the gene key 7 relates to the diaphragm. So, at the shadow level, which remember is governed by fear and keeps us in a sense of distrust for life, um, we're looking at one of the gates that relates to leadership in life. And at the fear level, the natural ability to lead shows up as division. It creates hierarchies in life. And so we fall into the dynamic with this energy of either being a victim and feeling that we need to be led or becoming a forceful leader. So we can see how, at the fear level of life, it keeps us all divided.
Mhm.
Um, it makes us believe that there are, you know, some people have that energy of authority and they feel they need to be bowed to.
Yeah.
And the rest of us feel like we need to be led. And so, um,
It, it's funny because our whole society, the structures are all like that. Like when you look at businesses, you look at government, you look at anything, and that hierarchy is there. And there's always that division, right?
yeah. And
Mm.
it's really hard to even imagine a world where that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
The best, I mean, Richard Rudd, it's woven through many of the gene keys, is one of the
Mhm.
ones that I see really trying to imagine that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, when we get to the level of the gift, we see how different it is because the gift is
Mhm.
guidance, the genius for being able to guide.
Mhm.
And it points out that a true leader is somebody who listens. Um, a true leader is somebody who listens so well and empathizes so deeply with a person's suffering that it gives people the permission to live without fear, to release that in themselves. Um, and then we start to shift from a self serving approach to life to a whole serving approach to life,
You know,
serving the whole.
that just triggered something for me. So as I was listening to you explain um, the guidance part, and it just seems to me when we talk about parents and children, that when you allow the child to be who they are without judgment, without that fear, without all of that stuff around them, that they feel safe enough to actually explore and become that which they are, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I mean you bring up a good point. Um, because at the civic level of virtue, um, we see that how do you explain virtue? Um, at the level of virtue, at the level of the city, there's this energy where just as the lower energy divides us,
Mm-hmm.
virtue virtue
Reunite.
repair virtue unites us. Virtue repairs the world, and I really love this idea. The
Mm-hmm.
idea that, when we're in an energy of virtue, actually the world gets repaired. The divisions are erased. And one of the things that Richard Rudd says here is that um, children who grow up amongst virtuous people don't
Mm-hmm.
need any other kind of guidance or education. The
Yeah.
best environment for children is to grow up with virtuous adults.
Well, what comes to me when you say virtue is doing the right thing and always knowing the right thing to do. So, if children grow up around virtuous people and they're always doing what's in alignment and what is correct and what is right, then they will learn through osmosis. Like, children learn by watching and doing, right? What their parents and their environment has for them, right?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, this is also not about, this is not, I mean, I think there are actions which are probably arise out of virtue, but
Mhm.
these things are vibratory energies as well, the vibration of virtue.
Mhm.
Um, it's kind of like leadership is determined by genetics, is one of the things that Rudd says, but quality of leadership is determined by the frequency that passes through those genetics.
Mhm.
So, I've studied the Tao Te Ching a little bit. I still have
Mhm.
a book and I still dip into it and out of it, but I just love it because it's all about, I mean, virtue is really hard to describe, but I have a sense of it. And it's about, oh, it's, yeah, I'm at a loss here. I have the seven in my I have the seven in my profile, and I have yeah, I guess one of the best examples for me, I was thinking about this, is the Dark Crystal movie. Have you seen that?
A long time ago with my children, so that would be like 35
Yeah.
years ago.
Well, in this movie, there are these mystics who are these um, deep, slow, spiritual leaders who are very non-confrontational and pacifistic. And then there's the evil Skeksis who are kind of manipulative and corrupt and forceful and domineering. And at the end of the movie, the myth is that this crystal was shattered. Okay. Um, and we find out at the end that the mission is for these little creatures to repair the crystal because they have a shard of the crystal. And there's a prophecy. And as it comes to fulfillment, all the Skeksis and the mystics, they gather. And the crystal is repaired. And the Skeksis and the mystics merge into one being.
Into a new being.
Into a new being, the being that they
Mhm.
were originally meant to be. So
Mhm.
it repairs the world. And that's
Mhm.
kind of a beautiful image, I think, for this gene key. Is
Right.
that, I mean, this is, I really want to believe this, but uh, it's hard. Richard Rudd says that the gene key 7 is our insurance policy that we will never destroy ourselves as a human species.
Mhm.
Because as much as we see division in the world, um, countless countless thousands and millions of actions happen all the time that also
Mhm.
act to repair the world.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to number 4. So what can you tell us about number 4?
4 starts with intolerance at the shadow and moves to forgiveness. And in the middle, we have the genius, we have the gift of understanding. This is in the neocortex. It's one of the ajna gates. So at the shadow frequency, intolerance arises out of, when the mind is, in a sense, in the grip of unstable and chaotic emotions, then it leads to this desire to come up with a logical framework to justify the way you what you believe in the world. So this is where intolerance comes from. This is where racism comes from. This is where prejudices of all kinds come from. It's the misuse of logic. We think logic is objective, but when logic is driven by somebody at the shadow level of their life, then it's not objective at all. Logic can be used to support any argument. It can be completely, any position can be supported by logic, because logic can be twisted. And that's what it does. That's what it does at the shadow frequency. It creates this intolerance, and it creates people who are very convinced that they're right. And their sense of being right, backed up by their distorted logic, gives them a feeling of stability, of solidity. It's not until we get to the gift level, understanding, that we're able to see how logic based on fear is not a positive force in the world. So this is where we start to let go of the mind, let go of the belief that the mind can ever help us understand anything. It becomes paradoxical, really. You use logic to defeat logic, and then you escape logic, and you enter into an energy of understanding. And this really does help us understand people better.
This is dropping the head into the heart, getting out of the head and dropping it into the heart so that you can feel what's going on instead of trying to make a logical decision about it. My experience of having this channel was always being able to see both sides. Like I can remember instances, for example, when my ex-husband and I split up, and my mother saying to me, like, why are you defending him? Why are you sticking up for him? And I said, well, there's two sides to every story. Like, it's not all one-sided, right? So, I mean, it was me trying to drop into that understanding space rather than being in the logical space. Well, he did this to me, he did that to me, la, 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 la. I would always see both sides. And then, having somebody say something like that, then you start going, oh, well, maybe there's something wrong with me because I look at the world a different way, right? So I think that's the thing. Like, it's very easy for me to go from one mode to the other. Like, once I've heard the story, it's easy to turn the switch and see the other side, to see both sides.
I agree. I have the 4, and I have that experience as well.
Yeah. Like, you can start off in that space of intolerance, right? But it's very easy to shift into that other state once you start hearing and actually listening to the story, right? Or you start trying to understand it, right? And actually feel what the other person is feeling, or yeah.
Yes. And it makes you aware of how, logic, how the mind is not useful in many ways.
Well, that's the choo-choo train. That's what I like to call it. When you get on the logic choo-choo train and and especially, I can't remember what gate it is, but the one that makes me want to go, why? And it's the channel of doubt, is it? I don't remember. But I know that that's a thing for me. It's like, why did that happen? Why is this happening? What? And as soon as you start doing that, you can get on that train, and it's never ending. And sometimes you just have to sit and go, okay, like this is what happened. I have a choice how I deal with it, and just move on and stop trying to understand it with the logical brain, because trying to understand it here just drives you crazy sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It isn't productive.
Mm.
Only, as you say, opening the heart so that you move out of the vibration of fear
Hmm.
allows you to, in a sense, look at it differently and
Hmm.
perhaps get to the Citic experience, which is forgiveness.
Yeah. I think that the question changes too, right? So instead of saying, like, why is this happening to me? It's like, what would cause that other person to react in that manner? So then you drop into the empathy of trying to understand why their reaction is, rather than, a self blaming, self doubting space,
Mm,
right? So,
mm-hmm.
and that's a whole shift when you try to come from somebody else's perspective rather than your own, and just trying to get your own agenda across versus actually trying to understand, right? Can't remember who
Right.
I can't remember who said that. It's something about the wise man who listens, and it's the fool who always knows, or something. So it's when you're trying to listen to gain the understanding rather than, just sharing what you know, right? So that's how you
Mm-hmm.
learn, right? Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I like your discussion around this, our discussion, because all of these things can be looked at and unpacked in this way, and that's what I would invite all our listeners to do.
Hmm.
Is, how does this relate? Can you feel your movement between these levels? And I
Hmm.
mean, forgiveness is beautiful. I mean, the four is actually part of my incarnation cross,
Hmm.
and I have this feeling that when you drop into or rise to, I'm not sure which image I like best,
Hmm.
then it allows you to forgive everything
Hmm.
because it erases everything.
Yeah, it's like you
Um,
don't make judgments on it, you just allow it. Like you see it and then you just allow it to move through you, because there's no charge to it, right? You take that highly volatile, charged emotional state out of it and you see it for what it is.
yeah, but even more,
Mm-hmm.
they, at the citic level, that sense of compassion and empathy that you spoke of is
Mm-hmm.
magnified many times.
Mm-hmm.
There's that thing, all of the, I like how Richard Rudd talks about the forgiveness being the universal panacea. He says that it erases, it dissolves all the genetic blocks and lifts all the karmic curses wherever it travels.
Mm-hmm.
So when you actually reach or feel into that energy of forgiveness, which of course is very linked up with, I think, Christ consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
then all the barriers that we have put up between each other fall away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's funny though. When we talk about forgiveness too, what comes to my mind is like this whole internal thing. Like we need to be able to forgive ourselves in order to understand and forgive others, like to understand what true forgiveness is. Like we tend to forgive ourselves last for our mistakes, or for, errors in judgment, or, the way we do things, or things like that. But we truly have to embrace and love ourselves so that we can have empathy, compassion, and love others, right? Because it comes from the inside out, not the outside in, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
because it's the way we view the world arises from our own vibration,
Mm-hmm.
and um, it's our own vibration, our own consciousness that we have the most ability to influence. So until we do it for ourselves, yeah, I mean, we're at
Yeah.
the center. Each one of us is at the center of our own lives. You're not going to see these things differently unless you go through that journey to face your fears, and open up to the possibility of living a life beyond fear. So yeah, I
Exactly.
totally agree.
Yeah. And then something else when you say that comes to mind when we talk about the line numbers. So when line 1 is fear and the way through it is to move. But so many of us get stuck and frozen and we're afraid. But when we just start taking those steps, like Martin Luther King says, just take the staircase one step at a time, right? It's the movement that helps you move through that fear. And then you start to see the little progresses, right? And that's what keeps you going. Yeah.
Yeah, for
It's magic.
sure.
Yeah.
Do it, start somewhere.
Exactly.
Form an intention to be free and start, and just start
Yeah.
and keep going.
So what do we want to look at next week?
Next week, we talk about 29, which is devotion, and 59, which is transparency.
Ooh,
So
our
they're
friend
both,
Lori.
yeah, they're both in the solar plexus.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the deeper level, the 59 is about intimacy a lot. And 29 is all about our commitment in life that, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, we're going to sign off today, and we look forward to seeing you next week to finish off this Ring of Union. And Hartwell, have a wonderful, magical day. And everybody out there, God bless you.